This is the broadcast of Back Roads of Illinois. We are bringing latest agricultural news and markets update on Back Roads of Illinois. Bring you like inside of the markets and interview with people in the agricultural industry for farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and across the Midwest. Today is edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were Central Illinois agriculture source, and in the Midwest alongside in Central Illinois agriculture, we were glad you're here on a Friday afternoon. We were going to talk about the planting progress in Brazil and Argentina. We are watching the weather forecast and the election season in the United States. We've got Brian basing from Advanced Trading. We're running with Pete Meyer from Muddy Ag on Back Roads of Illinois. This show powered by AgriGold for Central Illinois, your AgriGold reps Brett Lahr. He is your AgriGold reps for Central Illinois. I talked with Kyle Bumstead from Allendale Incorporated. Corn harvest has been going in Nebraska, but they had a wet growing season in upper Midwest. You know that Iowa has been tested for drought and the wet weather in Iowa and Minnesota, South Dakota. We've been having a discussion about cash market in upper Midwest alongside the presidential election with Nomi Bloom from Total Farm Marketing for this week on Back Roads of Illinois. Otherwise, this time is for your agricultural news and markets update sponsored by AgriGold for Central Illinois. The cattle placement is coming for today at 3 p.m. Central Time from the Department of Agricultural. There is some analyses say that the cattle herd is going to be lower than expected after 1 year ago on the expansion. The FIT convention is underway in Indianapolis. It's closing for tomorrow afternoon after picking the national officers at the convention in Indianapolis. Well, we've been seeing the export to China for this week on 133,500 metric tons of corn and beans for this week from the Department of Agricultural. This been your agricultural news on Back Roads of Illinois, sponsored by AgriGold for Central Illinois. We're back with Brian basing from Advanced Trading on Back Roads of Illinois. This is the open numbers of the commodity markets from Kyle Bumstead from Allendale Inc. Corn futures are down at 5 to 10 cents. Soybean futures are down at 4 to 5 cents. Wheat futures are down at 8 to 7 cents. This time is your livestock markets update sponsored by Kyle Bumstead from Allendale Incorporated. Cattle futures are down at 8 to 10 cents. Feeder cattle are down at 4 to 6 cents. Lean hogs are down at 4 to 6 cents. Crude oil are up to 9 to 5 cents per barrel. Dow Jones are up to 9 points. Get the most for every acre with AgriGold for your field. You can find more information on AgriGold. Come or call your deal today. We are going to talk about the planting progress in Brazil and Argentina. We are watching the weather forecast and the election season in the United States. We've got Brian listening from Advanced Trading in Bloomington, Illinois. How are things in Bloomington, Illinois? How is the beans yields in central Illinois?
I would say, first of all, thank you for having me, Caesar. I would say that harvest here in central Illinois is winding down. There's still some corn yet to be harvested, but most of the beans now have been harvested. I would say that maybe some of the later soybean fields didn't yield quite as good as the early soybean fields. That's a general statement, of course, but it was drier, of course, as your listeners know, during the growing season, the later part of the growing season. So we didn't get those showers that we saw on those earlier beans that were planted, for example, in early April. There were some of the first beans to be harvested and had tremendous yields. The yields are still good for the most part, but I would say in general that they're not quite as good as what they were for the early beans that received more rainfall this summer.
How is the percentage of the harvest progress at this point?
I would say around Bloomington, Caesar, that we're probably 90% done on soybeans, maybe even more than that. There's some double crop beans, perhaps, that a field or two here and there that need to be harvested yet. And just not many bean fields left. Corn, I drove around last weekend, and of course, a lot of work has been done this week, but I would say half the corn was yet to be harvested last weekend. And now a lot of progress has been made this week. So I would say maybe we're down to the last, 25 to 30% of the corn in this area. It's been a very dry and very fast harvest. There have been some field fires reported, unfortunately, in some cases. Hopefully, that there have been few and far between. But I would say that that's been the theme of the 2024 harvest is how rain-free the period has been the last month and how fast the harvest has gone. I would say that there's supposed to be some rain moving in around Halloween next week, which may stall the very end of the corn harvest if it's heavy rain. But other than that, it looks like between now and Halloween, we're still going to have open conditions, a little bit cooler temperatures the next few days compared to recently, and then it's going to warm up again next week. So, but I would say we're pretty well done with the beans and on that last 25 to 30% of the corn now.
Yes, it's been really dry. Let's start with our conversation about the planting progress in Brazil. However, in Mato Grosso, how is the soybean planting? Could you explain to our listeners about South America?
Yeah, as we speak today here, Caesar, we're wrapping up harvest and they're starting to plant, of course, in Brazil, as you said, soybeans. Planting in Brazil got off to a slow start here in the month of October because it was too dry. Producers were waiting for the rainfall to give the seed bed more moisture. Of course, they just finished the dry season in Brazil earlier this month. They have gotten more rain, significantly more rain the last 2 to 3 weeks. They are actively planting soybeans now. In the largest state that you mentioned is Mato Grosso. They started very slowly. They will be the first state also to harvest beans in early 2025. However, they are rapidly planting beans now in Mato Grosso. I would guess that they're now closer to 50% to 60% done. We'll get a report this afternoon on their planting progress in that state of Mato Grosso. But I would not say that there has been a potential loss on soybean yields at this point. In other words, just because the crop is getting planted a little later than normal, I think it still has pretty much full potential Obviously, a long way to go between now and January, February, which is when that harvest will take place in the north. And we, of course, have to go to pod set and pod fill and all those stages of development. But for now, I would say that the biggest factor that it may result in down the road, all else being equal, would be a little bit later harvest start of harvest. But again, that's months away. I think that the key is that they have gotten more rain and they are planting quite aggressively right now.
Do you hear about Brazil's soybean planting progress from your counterpart in Brazil?
I would say in contrast, Caesar, to the north, which is Mato Grosso is in the north.
Let's go with the livestock markets, especially for the cattle on feed report on today.
The cattle on feed report will come out at 2 p.m. Central Time this afternoon on Friday, Caesar. The trade is looking for the on feed number, or October 1st, to be almost equal to last year, 99.7%. There is not a very wide trade range, only 99.1 to 100.1%, so not much variation there. Placements in September are 95.8% of last year. There's a little bit wider trade range on the placements, 94.2 to 99, and marketed in September is 102.2. The trade range is 98.1 to 103.4. This will be an important report, Caesar, because we're looking at some very strong cash cattle trends as well as the futures market trends here recently. December contract here on Friday, October the 25th, closed closed about unchanged, only a dime lower, but it did reach one of the highest levels yesterday in many months. So cash cattle was reported to be traded this week in the South at about $190, which is about where the October contracts traded today. So the market will be on its have a very keen attention to this report because these prices are so high. Will we see that marketing number, for example, meet those expectations at 102.2? It would be important that we don't see any indication of backed up cattle, for example. And then we'll take a look at placement trends in September and, of course, overall on feed trends on October 1st.
How is the corn market for the feed demand?
Feed demand, I think, is in pretty good shape at the moment, Caesar. We're not seeing any type of signs of liquidation, for example. Hog futures have made contract highs. Lean hog futures have made contract highs for the 2025 contracts this week. So those contracts are at attractive levels. Um, at the moment, again, the cattle on feed are about unchanged from what they were a year ago. I don't see the wheat corn spread at the moment encouraging wheat substituting for corn in feed rations. So I think that for this, we're about, oh, we're almost to two-thirds of the way through the first quarter of the marketing year, which is September, October, November. We're almost through October here. And I would say that corn feeding has held on the first 2 months of this year. I don't see any signs of a big contraction in feeding at the moment.
Do you have any final thoughts or recap of our conversation about the grain trading and policy plan for next few months?
Well, first of all, again, thank you for the opportunity, Caesar. I think you reach an important audience here as producers finish up the harvest here. Hopefully, a safe harvest for 2024. What I would share with your listeners is that it's very important for these marketing plans for 2024 bushels to get control of those bushels, and by that I mean it's very important to establish a floor price for 2024 bushels. And yet there are marketing tools available that are more flexible that leave the upside opportunity intact. One tool, for example, will be the purchase of a put option. If newly harvested 2024 corn and soybean bushels are put into harvest, or beg your pardon, are put into storage. If a producer is elected to sell those bushels across the scale, he or she can purchase a call option, for example, that will also provide upside opportunity. I'd remind your listeners, Caesar, that we're just getting started with that South American growing season, and much can change over the next few months. And of course, we are seeing a very strong export program too. So in a nutshell, I would say get control of your newly harvested 2024 bushels. Every year is different, but I would remind your listeners the last year, the market did never have a post-harvest recovery. It traded sideways to lower into winter and into spring. It had just a very modest recovery back at planting time. Every year is different. I don't have a crystal ball that tells us what we're going to look at, but I would just remind your listeners that there is obviously tools available, marketing tools available to get control of these bushels. And I would say, Caesar, it's not too early to think about 2025 bushels, particularly if you've made that decision on what you're going to plant for 2025, that there are tools available such as a short-dated put option, which will give you price protection between now and, for example, the February crop insurance price period, February 2025 crop insurance, that's when they'll set the base price, of course, for crop insurance next year. So it's not too early to think about 2025. I would add that if we're looking at no weather problems surfacing in Brazil, Brazil is in position to raise its largest soybean crop ever this year, and that would, all else being equal, would weigh on the soybean price, I think, in 2025. So it's just something to keep in mind going forward. But just to wish everyone, if they're still harvesting, a safe harvest, safe conclusion of the harvest, safe fall field work. I know that's a busy time too, trying to get fall field work done. But just keep marketing on the front burner of your attention. We know how important it is to the bottom line of your operation.
Where people can find you for your consulting services for their grain marketing and livestock marketing.
Be happy to visit with anyone who'd like to talk about the markets, Caesar. My number is 309-664-2314. And I'd be happy to visit with anyone who calls, and then I could put you in contact with one of our risk management consultants who'd be happy to visit with producers and designing a customized marketing plan.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Caesar.
That's Brian, basing from Advanced Trading. He is based in Bloomington, Illinois, on back roads of Illinois. Get the most for every acre with AgriGold for your field. You can find more information on AgriGold. Come or call your deal today. We are back with Pete Meyer from Muddy Ag. This segment is provided by AgriGold. Well, we'll watch the 45Z models with a substantial full aviation for this moment in the agricultural sector. It is pretty concerned about this topic with the election going on. We were talking about that with Pete. How are things in New Jersey?
Well, I'm actually in Iowa, and it's pretty dry, and the harvest has really accelerated here. A lot of the commercial buyers are full, and that the crop is obviously very substantial. And I see basis levels are dropping. The futures market's had a good run here this week, but is back down today on Friday as we talk about this, Caesar. But, you bring up a very interesting point about 45Z. I mean, here we are sitting on a huge crop. Okay, next year's crop could be even bigger, which is a real problem because rotationally we may go back to 2023 acres when we had almost 95 million planted. And, if we get the same yield or maybe even a tick higher yield, we're looking at a 16 billion bushel crop. And that's a problem. But the 45Z has been an extreme disappointment to us. We were promised rules on 45Z back in March. Then we were told in June, and now we're told in December. And really, it's a difficult thing. I mean, I could make the same comparison, Caesar, with the Farm Bill, right? I mean, I don't know that anybody's going to stick their neck out now, in front of you. Well, first off, they're half of Congress or most of Congress won't be in session, and then they'll go into a lame duck session. Now, does that mean that that's going to hold up the rulemaking? It shouldn't. But I would imagine that, if Trump gets elected, that, you're not going to hear anything from the Secretary of Agriculture or the USDA or anybody else involved with the 45Z. So there still is demand for 45Z. There is demand for sustainable aviation fuel. There's a company building a huge plant in Lake Prescott or Lake Preston. I'm sorry, I don't remember which one it is. I always get it wrong. In South Dakota, it's a company called Gevo. They're getting a $1.5 or $1.6 billion grant to get that plant up and running. It is going to be a net carbon zero plant. And at the end of the day, Caesar, it's really a shame because we just need more demand. We need more demand. And it's just, whether it's in soybeans or in corn, we need more demand. We're producing these monster crops, and the demand is just starting to wane a bit. So, yeah, we're very disappointed. We work with some ethanol plants. We work with farmers who are anticipating 45Z on January 1st to 25. If you held my feet to the fire, so to speak, I would think we probably don't know anything until first quarter of 2025. And then at that point, the farmers will be preparing for the next crop, and may not be able to qualify for this. So very concerning in a time when we really need demand, Caesar, that we're just not getting any movement on 45Z.
Yeah. However, we will see on the election for next 2 weeks or less. But it has been pretty not very good in the Midwest for right now. How the farmers' feelings about this election season for this week?
Well, I mean, when I travel through the Midwest, I mean, it's obviously Trump country, or a lot of areas of Trump country. The East Coast and the West Coast are Harris company, but Harris country. But when I look at, it's so hard, right? Because at the end of the day, Caesar, Trump has already said that he has no interest at all in continuing the Inflation Reduction Act, which 45Z is part of the Inflation Reduction Act. He instead wants to take those billions of dollars that were earmarked for 45Z and fix bridges and roads and other stuff. He said as much in his acceptance speech at the Republican National Convention. The man can change his mind. I totally get it. But at the end of the day, he is not a big fan of renewables. I think that he's a little bit misguided in the fact that what he's talking about money going to China has to do with the production of batteries for electric vehicles and not necessarily renewable fuels. I think that, it's hard to gauge him. Now, if Vice President Harris gets elected, I would imagine she will push forward with the Inflation Reduction Act, and that will include 45Z. Now, when we get those rules again, as we just talked about briefly before, Caesar, would be, probably March or something like that. So maybe it's a 26 or 27 type deal. I have noticed that, or I have read that even though we're, we haven't even gotten the rules yet, there's already some push in Congress.
Are there any other way to get China to coming back to buy more beans? Do Harris if win?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I mean, we lost the soybean market to Brazil 7 or 8 years ago, whenever it was. Um, I actually think soybeans could have a dollar downside here. I don't see. I think soybeans are overpriced at their current level of where to close today. Like let's call it 9.90. I think $9 is certainly a possibility. The only thing that could really happen here, Caesar, is that the market is going. I think the market will react stronger to problems in Brazil than problems in the U.S. And I think that's an opportunity for the farmers that are listening out there that they should really try to pay more attention to Brazilian seasonality than U.S. seasonality. And the reason for that is just because we don't have the export market. Now, there may be some more interest in bean oil coming. We've had an issue here where there's been an explosive demand change in Indonesia for B40 or B50. They're using palm oil for that. Now, I know we don't import palm oil for the production of renewable diesel, but let's just say that I think that some palm oil has been sneaking in the form of used cooking oil. So now it doesn't price in anymore. So maybe that'll help our bean oil demand. As far as meal demand is concerned, it's hard to find much more out there. We really need to find export markets for meal as much as we need to find export markets for soybeans. Now, the other issue in China, Caesar, is that a few weeks ago, or maybe it's a month now already, they had a round of stimulus. That's when we traded beans up to 10.50, and here we are back down to 9.90. The stimulus package didn't work, and the bigger problem in China is that their birth rate is suffering. There was big promotions in China for people to increase the size of their families, and that's really the underlying problem, in my opinion, is just that they're just not enough mouths to feed. So I don't really, to answer your question, I'm not really sure how we get the soybean market back.
You mentioned that it is pretty difficult for right now. How about the corn export to China and Mexico for right now?
Well, Mexico has certainly been a dominant buyer of corn. I do wonder, Caesar, if that's part of this Trump tariff deal where they're trying to buy some corn in case Trump does get elected. If he doesn't get elected, will they cancel the corn? I don't know. As far as China is concerned, I mean, I don't really think China's bought any corn. They've bought some soybeans when Brazil looked dry in September, but then in October we started to get some rain. So I don't really think we're going to see much of a production issue in Brazil. Maybe they'll be, 1% below trend or something like that. Argentina, the same thing for both corn and soybeans. So, yeah, it's to see Mexico in buying corn is great. We are 250 million bushels above last year's pace. We're 100 million bushels higher than the USDA's pace. But again, Caesar, I wonder if it's just being front loaded here in the beginning of the season. And then, of course, we have this issue. It's dry in Illinois. It's dry, or some parts of Illinois. It's very dry in Iowa. The Mississippi River, could we run into a problem there where we just don't have enough water flow to get exports downriver? I don't know. I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit, so I apologize for that. But it's a tough period. Tough period.
Do you have any final thoughts or recap of our conversation about updating on the harvest progress?
No, I mean, there are some concerns out there with how dry it's been. That the dryness is going to leak its way into next year. If I had a crystal ball, I'd have a better idea, but at the moment, it's anybody's guess, right? I mean, it looks like it's going to be a La Nina winter, which means that the upper Midwest is going to get rain. The South is not going to get any rain, so we'll have to see how that develops. I have noticed though that the like December corn for next year really hasn't moved much. If anything, it's gotten a little bit closer to December 24 corn. That suggests to me that there's very little support for anybody to buy next year's corn. And I think that probably has something to do with the acres that we talked about earlier. Soybeans, I don't really like the price action. As I said, I'm pretty bearish on soybeans. And so that's it. So the only other thing I would say is that anybody that's still out there harvesting, I wish them a safe harvest. And I also want to congratulate you on your sponsorship. I know you work hard on this program and this podcast, and it's always great to visit with you. Thank you, Caesar.
Where people can find you for your consulting services for their grain marketing and livestock marketing.
We're not. You can reach me for any questions at Pete, P-E-T-E, at Muddy, M-U-D-D-Y, Boots, B-O-O-T-S, ag.com. Pete at muddybootsag.com. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding 45Z or any other issues that that farmers want to talk about. Thank you for that, Caesar.
Thanks, Peter. That's Pete Meyer from Muddy Adirondack Roads of Illinois. This is close bell numbers of the commodity markets from Kyle Bumstead from Allendale Inc. January feeder cattle dollar plus. 10 closing at $245.625. December live cattle dollar dash. 10 closing at $189.150. December lean hogs dollar plus 1.025 closing at $79.675. December corn -6 single quote 2 closing at $4.15 single quote 2. January soybeans -7 single quote 4 closing at $9.97 single quote for December. Chicago wheat -12 single quote 4 closing at $5.69 single quote 0. December KC wheat -15 single quote 0 closing at $5.72 single quote 0. Closing quotes provided by Kyle R. Bumstead Branch Office Manager Erickson, Nebraska Allendale, Incorporated. The risk Thanks to Brian Basting and Pete Meyer from Muddy Adirondack Roads of Illinois. We're running out of time on our show, but you can listen to our show wherever you get your podcast. That's been Back Roads of Illinois. I am Cesar Delgado. Have a good weekend.